They had reached the thieves' quarter wall now. Inigo jumped on Fezzik's shoulders, and Fezzik started to climb. Conclusion 1. Inigo continued, not missing a beat. Since the prince is in Florence City, taking out his temper on the man in black must also be in Florence City. Conclusion 2. The man in black must not be too happy with his present situation. Conclusion 3. I am in Florence City and need a planner to avenge my father while he is in Florence City and needs a rescuer to salvage his future. And when people have equal needs of each other, conclusion 4 and final, deals are made. Fezzik reached the top of the wall and started carefully climbing down the other side. I understand everything, he said. You understand nothing, but it really doesn't matter, since what you mean is you're glad to see me, just as I am glad to see you, because no more loneliness. That's what I mean, said Fezzik. I love how, good friends they are, that they care for each other. It's a good way, to follow that, torture scene, to follow it with something wholesome, getting Fezzik and Inigo back with each other again. I do always, I have a soft spot, I think, for, two, side characters that end up, whether they start that way or not, by the end of it, they're, brothers in arms, and they're, there for each other. I don't know, I something about bromances is just, just warm and cozy to me. It was dusk when they began their search blindly through all of Florence City. It's a nice reprieve from the shadiness and darkness of the prince and count. Yeah, I needed that balance. It was hard to read, the torture stuff. And not just the torture, but, the prince kind of manipulating Buttercup. That was hard as well. And so, to have that, balance, evening things out is really nice. It was dusk when they began their search blindly through all of Florence City. Dusk, a day before the wedding. Count Rugen was about to begin his nightly experiments at that dusk, gathering up his notebooks from his room, filled with all his jottings. 5 levels underground, behind high castle walls, locked and chained and silent, Wesley waited beside the machine. In a way, he still looked like Wesley, except, of course, that he had been broken. 20 years of his life had been sucked away. 20 were left. Pain was anticipation. Soon the Count would come again. Against any wishes he had left, Wesley went on crying. It was dusk when Buttercup went to see the prince. She knocked loudly, waited, knocked again. She could hear him shouting inside, and if it had not been so important, she would never have knocked the 3rd time. But she did, and the door was yanked open, and the look of anger on his face immediately changed to the sweetest smile. Beloved, he said, come in. A moment more is all I need. And he turned back to Yellen. Look at her, Yellen, my bride-to-be. Has any man ever been so blessed? Yellen shook his head. Am I wrong, do you think, to go to any lengths, then, to protect her? Yellen shook his head again. The prince was driving him crazy with his stories of the Gilder infiltration. Yellen had every spy he'd ever used working day and night, and not one of them had come up with anything about Gilder. And yet the prince insisted. Inwardly, Yellen sighed. It was beyond him. He was simply an enforcer, not a prince. In fact, the only remotely disturbing news he'd heard since he'd closed the thieves' quarter that morning was within the hour, when someone told him of a rumor that the ship of the dread pirate Roberts had perhaps been seen sailing all the way into Florence Channel itself. But such a thing, Yellen knew from long experience, was simply rumor. I'll tell you, they are everywhere, these Gilders, the prince went on, and since you seem unable to stop them, I wish to change some plans. All the gates have been sealed to my castle except the front one, yes? Yes, and 20 men guarded. Add 80 more. I want 100 men. Clear? 100 men it will be. Every brute available. Inside the castle, I'm quite safe. I have my own supplies, food, stables, enough. As long as they cannot get at me, I will survive. These, then, are the new and final plans. Jot them down. All 500th anniversary arrangements are cancelled until after the wedding. The wedding is tomorrow sunset. My bride and I will ride my whites to Florin Channel, surrounded by all your enforcers. There we will board a ship and begin our long-awaited honeymoon, surrounded by every ship in the Florin Armada. Every ship but 4, Buttercup corrected. He blinked at her a moment in silence. Then he said, blowing her a kiss, but discreetly, so Yellen couldn't see. Yes, yes, how forgetful I am, every ship but 4. He turned back to Yellen. But in his blink, in that following silence, Buttercup had seen it all. Those ships will stay with us until I deem it safe to release them. Of course, Gilder could attack then, but that is a chance we must risk. Let me think if there's anything else. The prince loved giving orders, especially the kind he knew would never need carrying out. Also, Yellen was a slow jotter, and that only added to the fun. Excused, the prince said finally. With a bow, Yellen was gone. The 4 ships were never sent, Buttercup said when they were alone. Don't bother lying to me any more. Whatever was done for your own good, Sweet Pudding. Somehow I do not think so. You're nervous. I'm nervous. We're getting married tomorrow. You've got a right to be. You couldn't be more wrong, you know. I'm very calm. And in truth, she did seem that way. It doesn't matter whether you sent the ships or not. Wesley will come for me. There is a God, I know that. And there is love, I know that too. So Wesley will save me. You're a silly girl. Now, go to your room. Yes, I am a silly girl, and yes, again, I will go to my room, and you are a coward with a heart filled with nothing but fear. The prince had to laugh. The greatest hunter in the world, and you say I am a coward. I do indeed. I'm getting much smarter as I age. I say you are a coward, and you are. I think you hunt only to reassure yourself that you are not what you are, the weakest thing to ever walk the earth. He will come for me, and then we will be gone, and you will be helpless for all your hunting, because Wesley and I are joined by the bond of love, and you cannot track that, not with 1,000 bloodhounds, and you cannot break it, not with 1,000 swords. Humperdinck screamed toward her then, ripping at her autumn hair, yanking her from her feet and down the long, curving corridor to her room, where he tore that door open and threw her inside and locked her there and started running for the underground entrance to the Zoo of Death. My father stopped reading. Go on, I said. Lost my place, he said. And I waited there, still weak with pneumonia and wet with fear, until he started reading again. Inigo allowed Fezzik to open the door. Hey, I said, hold it. That's not right. You skipped. And then I quickly caught my tongue, because we just had that scene when I got all upset about Buttercup marrying Humperdinck when I'd accused him of skipping, and I didn't want any repeat of that. Daddy, I said, I don't mean anything, but wasn't the prince sort of running toward the zoo, and then the next thing you said was about Inigo? And maybe, shouldn't there be a page or like that in between? My father started to close the book. I'm not fighting. Please don't close it. It is not for that, he said, and then he looked at me for a long time. Billy, he said, he almost never called me that. I loved it when he did. Anybody else, I hated it. But when the barber did it, I don't know. I just melted. Billy, do you trust me? What is that? Of course I do. Billy, you got pneumonia. You're taking this book very serious. I know, because we already fought once about it. I'm not fighting anymore. Listen to me. I never lied to you yet, did I? Okay? Trust me. I don't want to read you the rest of this chapter, and I want you to say it's all right. Why? What happens in the rest of this chapter? If I tell you, I could accomplish the same by reading. Just say okay. I can't say that until I know what happens. But tell me what happens, and I'll tell you if it's okay, and I promise if I don't want to hear it, you can skip on to Inigo. You won't do me this favor. I'll sneak out of bed when you're asleep. I don't care where you hide the book. I'll find it, and I'll read the rest of the chapter myself, so you might as well tell me. Billy, please. I gotcha. You might as well admit it. My father sighed this terrible sound. I knew I had him beaten then. Wesley dies, my father said. I said, what do you mean Wesley dies? You mean dies? My father nodded. Prince Humperdinck kills him. He's only faking though, right? My father shook his head, closed the book all the way. Ah, shit, I said, and I started to cry. I'm sorry, my father said. I'll leave you alone. And he left me. Who gets Humperdinck? I screamed after him. He stopped in the hall. I don't understand. Who kills Prince Humperdinck? At the end, somebody's got to get him. Is it Fezzik? Who? Nobody kills him. He lives. You mean he wins, Daddy? Jesus, what did you read me this thing for? And I buried my head in my pillow, and I never cried like that again, not once to this day. I could feel almost my heart emptying into my pillow. I guess the most amazing thing about crying, though, is that when you're in it, you think it'll go on forever, and it never really lasts half what you think. Not in terms of real time. In terms of real emotions, it's worse than you think, but not by the clock. When my father came back, it couldn't have even been an hour later. So, he said, shall we go on tonight or not? Shoot, I told him. Eyes dry, no catch in throat, nothing. Fire when ready. With Inigo? Let's hear the murder, I said. I knew I wasn't about to bawl again. Like buttercups, my heart was now a secret garden, and the walls were very high. I've definitely not had that kind of a reaction to stuff that I've read, where I'm like so upset I cry for an hour. But I have been emotionally invested, and I definitely have had like stories that really like gripped me. I'm trying to think of an example though. Like when I was in grade school, the kids had this, for some reason, like fascination with books about like teenagers with terminal illnesses. Kind of like what is it? A Walk to Remember? Is that one? I think that was a book that became a movie. And it was like she had like kidney failure or something, or leukemia or something. That style of book, when I was like about 6th grade, all of the girls in my class were like, you gotta read these books, and like we passed that kind of thing around. That was definitely a like heart-wrenching type of a story, but I don't think I ever like cried the way that's described. But I definitely, at least with this book, I think I do have visceral reactions more than like some of the other books that I've read. But on the other hand, I am reading it aloud, and that might unlock different things in a different way for me than if I was just reading it quietly to myself. So what am I unlocking here? I don't know. Maybe the difference is reading it out loud gets me into it more. And like seeing that from the perspective of the father who's reading it out loud. You know, he lets the kid go away and cry, but like who knows what the father's also feeling in that moment that he gives him his space. I don't know, I think I kind of want to feel that sort of connection there, because we're doing the same, we're kind of doing the same activity in a sense. Hearing it even in your own voice sinks in differently. Yeah. And I think also from an acting perspective, I'm trying to really like understand the characters more than just passively reading a story and like allowing the story to like happen to me. Whereas if I'm reading it out loud, I'm like I'm like right there with the story in a sense. Investing in them. Um, but yeah, I have to go back and go back to Humperdinck. I don't want to see the Humperdinck scene. Okay. Hopefully it's heavy, but then hopefully there's something that's lighter at the end. We'll see. Hi there. Thanks for joining our book club. If you'd like to join the conversation, I would love it if you would leave us a comment. And if you'd like to see more, check out the playlist.